60 years to life in prison. This coming here on this Wednesday out of Los Angeles. Of course, this is a live look in the courtroom right now. The Superior Court judge handed out the sentence to Eric R. Holder, who was found guilty of the 2019 first-degree murder of the 33-year-old Grammy-nominated hip-hop artist outside the clothing store Hussle, founded in South Los Angeles, the neighborhood where both men grew up under very similar circumstances.
Nearly 4 years after the tragic shooting of Nipsey Hussle, a beloved Los Angeles rapper whose death had a profound impact beyond the West Coast hip-hop community, Eric R. Holder Jr., the gunman, has been sentenced to 60 years to life in prison. Hussle, whose real name was Ermias Asghedom, was shot in on March 31, 2019, outside a clothing store he owned in South Los Angeles. The police quickly attributed the attack to a personal dispute. 2 days after the shooting, which also injured 2 bystanders, Eric R. Holder Jr., then 29, turned himself in at a mental health clinic, according to his lawyer. Holder was charged with first-degree attempted and possession of a firearm by a felon. He pleaded not guilty and was held on $6.5 million bail. At trial, Los Angeles County prosecutors contended that Eric R. Holder Jr. and Nipsey Hussle, 33, who were old acquaintances and members of the same street gang, had a chance encounter in a strip mall parking lot. During this encounter, Hussle mentioned rumors circulating in the neighborhood that Mr. Holder had cooperated with law enforcement. Minutes later, according to prosecutors and witnesses, Mr. Holder returned with 2 handguns and began firing repeatedly.
We have identified the person believed to be responsible for this devastating crime. He is 29-year-old Eric Holder.
Prosecutors argued that the was premeditated and charged Eric R. Holder Jr. with first-degree. Aaron Jansen, the public defender representing Mr. Holder, acknowledged during the trial that his client had pulled the trigger. However, he contended that the crime occurred in the heat of passion and that Mr. Holder should have been charged with voluntary manslaughter instead. After deliberating for less than an hour on their second day, the jurors found Eric R. Holder Jr. guilty of first-degree. This verdict indicated that they agreed with the prosecutor's assertion that Mr. Holder decided to Nipsey Hussle as he returned to his car, loaded a gun, took a few bites of fries, and then marched back through the parking lot to confront the rapper. Eric R. Holder Jr., 33, was also found guilty of 2 counts of attempted voluntary manslaughter for the wounding of 2 bystanders, lesser charges than the attempted counts initially brought by prosecutors. Mr. Jansen, Holder's attorney, argued that the case was overcharged and that his client had no specific intention of harming the 2 other men, both of whom were strangers to him, when he attacked Hussle. Additionally, Mr. Holder was found guilty of possessing a firearm as a felon and 2 counts of assault with a deadly weapon. In court, Eric R. Holder Jr. stared forward, unflinching. He wore a dark navy suit and white sneakers. As the verdict was announced, the courtroom remained silent, with no reaction from the half-full gallery. In the aftermath of Nipsey Hussle's in early 2019, a rare event unfolded within Los Angeles gang life that had not occurred since the early 90s. The untimely loss of the rap legend sparked a wave of truce talks between Bloods and Crips. Sets, divided by historical rivalries, sought common ground to honor Hussle's legacy. Hussle, a unanimously respected Grammy Award-winning affiliate of the Rollin' 60s Crips, was known for frequently reaching across enemy lines to help foster peace. The impromptu negotiations after Nipsey Hussle's echoed the tense moments before the Los Angeles uprising of 1992, when Tupac Shakur helped organize a truce picnic in Watts. This event aimed to unite rival factions under a 26-point Thug Life manifesto. This charter, created by the progeny of Black Panthers, outlined a more righteous path for those in the streets. It empowered hustlers to enrich themselves and their community while adhering to a strict code of honor. This unofficial constitution condemned snitching, attacking civilians and the police, and selling to children or pregnant women. It advocated for a professional code of ethics to create a safer and more prosperous LA. Alongside the work of other neighborhood activists, this initiative was credited with helping to reduce violence between warring gangs over the following years. At the time of these negotiations, the late Hussle was just 6 years old, living roughly 8 miles away in South Los Angeles. He would be just over 27 years later, March 31st, 2019, in front of the strip mall that he owned at the intersection of Crenshaw and Slauson, the blocks that he made internationally renowned. In these intervening decades, the rapper born Ermias Joseph Asghedom would come the closest to realizing Tupac's unrealized vision for community upliftment and unity. As he declared on his song, Dedication, Hussle was the Tupac of his generation, and he will be honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame on August 15th. The rightful LA heir to the late great Machiavelli was a platinum-certified entrepreneur who espoused a buy-back-the-block philosophy to ward off gentrification. His reputation remained unblemished in the streets, but he could also talk eloquently about using Opportunity Zone tax breaks. He nurtured the next generation of local rappers and looked past gang schisms while donating to nearby schools in the hopes that the neighborhood youth could escape generational poverty. To understand the importance of Nipsey Hussle is not merely to understand the influence of his songs, philanthropy, and philosophy, it's to reckon with the history of the city of Los Angeles and the power of symbolism.
He was a philanthropist, an entrepreneur, business person, mentor, role model. He was a hero to many young people in the Crenshaw area, but also throughout the nation. When he was, his death struck a chord with many. So with that, Your Honor.
Hussle was raised in the Hyde Park neighborhood, the son of an Eritrean immigrant father and a mother whose family left Louisiana during the Great Migration. In his pre-adolescence, he was a straight-A student who loved poetry and hip-hop, to the point where he built himself a computer from scratch in order to record music himself. At Hamilton High in West Los Angeles, Hussle was flipping burned CDs in the hallways for $5 apiece, working at his stepfather's Inglewood seafood restaurant, and catching trains and buses to participate in a musical education program at the Watts Towers. Around the same time, he joined his brother Sam in money-making schemes near Crenshaw and Slauson, where they'd sell everything from weed to bootleg DVDs to and t-shirts. Leaving high school at 15, Hussle enrolled at West Los Angeles Community College, where psychology and English classes vied for his focus against his rap dreams and hustling realities. There were countless recording sessions at makeshift home studios in unfriendly hoods. One early song managed to reach the ears of Tupac's mother, Afeni Shakur, who invited him and his collaborators to Georgia to perform at the 2002 release party of Tupac's posthumous album, Better Days. But the early success turned out to be one of several false starts. Legitimate national ascension wouldn't arrive for another half-dozen years, during which he'd rename himself Nipsey Hussle and embark on a 3-month trip to Eritrea that altered the trajectory of his life. In an interview with the filmmaker Tariq Nasheed, Hussle described the trip bringing him into being more conscious of my decisions. I couldn't embrace the narrative of this how expletive go, and that's what it is. That wasn't really it to me no more. Imbued with a deeper sense of family and connection to his African and Black American heritage, Hussle returned home with an enhanced clarity. This new lens toward his hometown eventually led to his breakthrough 2008 mixtape, the regionally canonized Bullets Ain't Got No Name, Volume 1, expanding upon LA's and palm trees, gangsta rap tradition. His flow and cadences bounced with the drowsy but never slipping menace of a young Snoop Dogg and the unvarnished soul of Tupac. He became the nexus between the 1990s Death Row Cha Aftermath empire and the Kendrick Lamar-led Top Dog entertainment domination that would soon define the next wave of West Coast hip-hop. By 2009, Hussle received his first taste of mainstream recognition for his crisscross sampling debut single, Hustle in the House. It failed to crack the Billboard charts, but introduced a broader audience to the next contender for the throne of LA street rap, a vacancy unclaimed for most of the previous decade. He made it clear that he was from the soil, starting his introductory anthem by interpolating NWA without succumbing to revivalist nostalgia. Unlike many of his unremembered Ozone's peers, who flatly mimicked West Coast gangster rap tropes, Hussle's three-dimensional storytelling turned his vignettes of street life into timeless anthems. If the plots largely revolve around familiar themes of relentless grinding, bewildering pain, and constantly encroaching enemies, his literary detail allowed listeners to feel the trickling sweat, the exhausting paranoia, and the doubt embedded in the prayers for safe passage through enemy hoods. Over the past 3 decades, there have been innumerable rap songs about paying dues, but on Hussle's 2008 Paid My Dues, the listener is transported to vanished Christmas mornings, when Nipsey and his brother were so broke that the closest they came to celebrating the holiday was watching a friend open presents. His raw talent and deafening buzz won him a deal with Epic Records, but things quickly went awry. Hussle hit all the quintessential benchmarks of a rising rap star. the XXL freshman cover, a Drake co-sign and feature, and the respect and admiration from two of LA's biggest artists at the time, Snoop Dogg and The Game. But his timing couldn't have been worse. CD sales had plummeted. The streaming era remained over a half-decade away, and mixtapes were rarely monetizable. Unless you had Dr. Dre's imprimatur, West Coast gangsta rap was seen as a nearly extinct subgenre. And after a corporate reshuffling at Epic ushered in a CEO who wanted Hussle to collaborate with the EDM producer Du Jour, he and the label parted ways.
Nah, I just didn't quit. That's the only distinguishing quality from me and probably whoever else going through this or went through this or is gonna go through this, is that I ain't quit. I went through every emotion. I went through every emotion with trying to pursue what I'm doing. You know what I mean? And I think that what gonna separate whoever's gonna try to go for something is that you ain't gonna quit.
What happened next might as well have come straight out of the hero's journey. For the next 3 years, Hussle struggled to sustain equilibrium. At least that's how it appeared to outsiders. If the Bay Area sustained a vibrant ecosystem for independent rappers, Los Angeles' proximity to the major labels made them seem necessary for any rapper aiming for seismic cultural impact. Hussle was left for dead by the industry. If respect for him remained unimpeachable, the hype dwindled. Odd Future, YG, Kendrick Lamar, and TDE became the new standard bearers from the West. Were it not for Hussle's stereoscopic vision, creativity, and indefatigable drive, he could have become a minor late Auzero's footnote. Defiantly forging a self-sustaining redoubt, Hussle redoubled his dedication to his craft, living in the studio, building up the roster of his All Money and imprint, and consecrating his philosophy of life as a marathon. His first release after going independent, appropriately titled The Marathon, was accompanied by a digital booklet featuring a new manifesto. "I am driven by both financial and creative motives," Hussle wrote. "The decision I had to make recently is which motive I would give priority to in my career." Hussle knew that his long-lasting impact would come not in making ephemeral hits for terrestrial radio, but soundtracks for the LA streets south of Interstate 10. In his essay, Hussle explained his dissatisfaction with the label and how the convoluted web of constantly shifting executives, A&Rs, and middle management meddled in the art, thereby creating confusion in consumers, which paradoxically diluted the authenticity that made them want to sign him in the first place. "I will never say something I don't agree with or believe in, even if the reward is massive," Hussle wrote. "I always told myself that if I make it here, I would keep it true to my heart and soul. I will not break my word for anyone." It was only right that his true rebirth began with a mixtape named after one of LA's central arteries, Crenshaw. Upon its 2013 release, the value of music had never felt more disposable. Determined to reaffirm its value as art, Hussle announced that physical copies would be sold for $100 apiece. Impressed by the bold gambit, Jay-Z publicly purchased 100 copies for $10,000, earning Hussle international headlines and an unmatched cosign for his business and branding ingenuity. With his career once again ascendant, he inked a partnership with Atlantic Records for Victory Lap, his eventual platinum-certified major label debut and magnum opus, which was released after a series of delays in early 2018. It debuted at number 4 on the Billboard 200 album charts and spawned Last Time That I Checked, his first single to land on the Hot 100. But like Tupac, the music worked in tandem with how Hussle existed as a cultural North Star. He exuded dignity, a royal bearing, and a generous heart that allowed him to transcend historical enmities. A proud Rollin' 60s Crip, Hussle famously collaborated with members of the Bloods and quietly worked behind the scenes to diffuse violence. Shortly before his death, he had set up a meeting with the Los Angeles Chief of Police to work on ways to stop gang violence and improve the lives of local children. Aware of the dangers that gentrification posed to historically black neighborhoods, Hussle established his Marathon clothing store in the same Crenshaw and Slauson strip mall, where he once handed out his mixtapes to anyone who would take one. Whereas many rappers only used their fame to promote close friends or those in whom they had a financial stake, Hussle mentored and helped introduce the new class of local superstars in 003 Grado, Bino Rideau, and G Perico, when the late South Central rapper Draco the Ruler was incarcerated on charges, for which he was later acquitted. Hussle messaged him to pay for his bail, even though they barely knew each other. And during the rise of Donald Trump, it was Hussle who stole the show with his verse on YG's FDT, the defining political diatribe of the era. Hussle's hyper-regional dedication fostered a level of fan appreciation that went far beyond a casual appreciation. If Tupac pledged his undying loyalty to Los Angeles late in life, Hussle's devotion to his city was unwavering since birth. He was a people's champ who was revered because the residents saw themselves in his Dodgers fitted and sense of tradition. His shout shout-outs to Mexican people and culture, and in his understated integrity that directly contradicted the Hollywood myth that most homegrown residents always blanched at.
Pac was a street dude.
Right.
And he represented thug life on the surface, right? But you get into the message and his direction, he was really a revolutionary and trying to lead people.
Yeah.
And trying to, you know what I mean, offer a positive direction without being preachy and without being so-called holier than thou. And that's what I meant in terms of like Tupac and my generation.
The tragedy of Tupac's life was that he was at just 25, leaving behind dozens of notebooks filled with his entrepreneurial dreams, movie scripts that went unmade, and plans to empower the black community. In Hussle, who would meet a similarly tragic demise in 2019, at the messianic age of 33, Shakur's vision would begin to be achieved. By operating the Marathon store and eventually buying the lot on which it stood, Hussle offered a sense of hope for the historically dispossessed. He employed local designers and other people from the surrounding blocks. It was not only that Hussle endured intense hardships to triumph, but also that he refused to abandon the place that had nurtured his gifts. This desire to give back, this wealth of spirit, would hauntingly lead to his death in early 2019, when Eric Holder shot him in front of his Marathon store. He was later convicted. Hussle was only there that afternoon to give free clothing to an acquaintance, recently released from prison and in dire need of assistance. According to court testimony, on that Sunday afternoon, Hussle arrived at the shopping plaza for an unannounced visit, as he often did. While catching up with friends and employees in the parking lot in front of his Marathon store, Hussle spent about half an hour signing autographs and posing for photos with fans. At the same time, a man Mr. Holder was casually dating was driving him around the area just to hang out, as she testified. This woman, initially kept anonymous to protect her from threats and harassment, was identified at trial as Brynita Nicholson. As they stopped to get something to eat, Ms. Nicholson noticed Hussle outside the store and made a passing remark about his appearance. Mr. Holder, without indicating that he knew the rapper, approached him for a brief conversation after ordering chili cheese fries at a nearby burger place, while Ms. Nicholson waited in the car. The brief conversation between the two men was described as casual and low-key, according to witness testimony. During this exchange, Hussle mentioned to Mr. Holder that there were rumors circulating about him cooperating with law enforcement or snitching. Hussle encouraged Mr. Holder to get the paperwork to prove otherwise and clear up the rumors, as stated by John McKinney, the Los Angeles County Deputy District Attorney. It just seemed like a regular conversation, Mr. McKinney told the jury. But obviously it wasn't. As the conversation between the men concluded, Ms. Nicholson approached Hussle for a selfie, which she later posted to Facebook. She testified. When asked if she sensed any impending conflict, Ms. Nicholson stated, "No, I wasn't afraid at all." Upon returning to the car, Mr. Holder instructed her to pull into another nearby parking lot so he could eat his fries, she said. While there, she witnessed him loading a 9mm, she testified. After taking a few bites of his food, he walked back toward Hussle's store. Witnesses reported that Mr. Holder confronted the rapper and uttered, "You're through," before opening fire with a gun in each hand, hitting Hussle at least 10 times, and then kicking him twice in the head. "You got me," Hussle said, according to the prosecutor. Two other men, Kerry Lathan and Shermy Villanueva, were wounded by the gunfire. Recognized in the neighborhood as another member of the Rollin' 60s Crips, Mr. Holder was more commonly known by his nickname, a descriptive epithet. Surveillance footage captured the shooting, along with the car he used to flee the scene, and the police promptly publicized this information. Upon seeing her vehicle featured on the news, Ms. Nicholson submitted to a 5-hour interview with police officers. Additionally, searches were conducted of her car and her mother's home, where Mr. Holder had spent the night of the shooting before relocating to hide out at a Motel 6. Ms. Nicholson testified that she had heard the gunshots, but was confused about what had occurred until she saw coverage of Hussle's death online. When Mr. Holder first returned to the car, she recalled during grand jury testimony in 2019, "He's like, drive, before I slap you." She declined to press him on the specifics of what happened out of fear, she said. That Tuesday, 2 days after the shooting, Mr. Holder was arrested without incident in Bellflower, Calif. The weapons were never found. Ms. Nicholson later agreed to immunity from prosecution in exchange for her testimony at trial. Mr. Holder was initially represented by Chris Darden, a lawyer perhaps best known for his role as one of the prosecutors in the 1995 trial of O.J. Simpson. However, Mr. Darden withdrew from the case shortly thereafter, citing death threats against his family. Instead, Mr. Holder was represented at trial by Mr. Jansen, the public defender, who did not dispute that Mr. Holder was the shooter, but argued instead that the case was overcharged. In court, Mr. Jansen stated that Mr. Holder was so enraged over the allegations of snitching that he returned 9 minutes later without thinking and began shooting without premeditation. He argued that instead of first-degree premeditated, Mr. Holder should have been charged with voluntary manslaughter because he acted in the heat of passion. Mr. Jansen also emphasized that Mr. Holder had no intent to harm Mr. Lathan and Mr. Villanueva, and therefore should not have been charged with attempted in their cases. Despite these arguments, Mr. Holder was ultimately convicted and faces life in prison. In addition to being the agreed-upon motive in the shooting of Hussle, the concept of snitching and its significant influence in gang culture affected court testimony in the case. While multiple witnesses identified Mr. Holder as the shooter, others declined to provide detailed recollections of the episode on the stand. Furthermore, one witness failed to appear, with lawyers on both sides citing a reluctance to testify due to fear of potential retribution. Even one of the victims of the shooting appeared reticent during the trial. Mr. Lathan, who was wounded in the incident, declined to identify Mr. Holder as the shooter while on the stand. "I don't know nothing, don't see nothing," he said, as reported by news sources. "You don't want to testify about what happened?" a prosecutor asked. "That's right," Mr. Lathan replied. Cedric Washington, a Los Angeles police detective, testified that the issue was widespread, not just limited to gang-related cases. "I found that a majority of people are reluctant to come to court or talk to law enforcement," he said on the stand. "Everybody seems to think that from coming to court, they are going to be subject to retaliation." On February 22, 2023, nearly 4 years after the shooting, a judge sentenced Mr. Holder to 60 years to life in prison. Mr. Holder received 25 years to life for the an additional 25 years to life because a firearm was used in the commission of the crime, and 10 years for shooting Mr. Lathan and Mr. Villanueva, according to the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. Anyways, all these battles can't deny the fact that we lost a legend. However, Tupac once said, "People die, but legends live forever." Hussle embodied this idea and sustained his ideas about social justice, black empowerment, and sense of artistic fearlessness. Hussle was not a substitute, but a new link added to the tradition. Their legacies now exist as an eternal form of native myth. In the firmament of hip-hop culture and Los Angeles life, they remain undying symbols of possibility, courage, and resistance. Those who fought for something much greater than themselves, that would never be realized in their lifetimes, but who could inspire their spiritual kinsmen to refuse to accept the status quo, to resist conventional wisdom and deep-rooted cynicism, and to understand that this is a long race.